I'm Cindy Jones, one of the founders of Bi-Tapp, and I have the opportunity today to visit with Alicia Rodriguez, who is a psychologist, and I'd like to welcome you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Can you just tell us the population you work with or specialize with, and then where do you practice at?
Sure. I'm a police and public safety psychologist. So essentially, I work with first responders, and I am based here in Hawaii. We're, of course, a set of islands. So I'm based on the island of Oahu, but I serve first responders pretty much all across the state. A lot of work is based on Maui, which Maui County actually has three different islands. So there's folks there, and then also on the Big Island. And I'm available to other first responders, but those tend to be the islands that I serve the most.
That sounds like a wide area that you're covering.
It sounds like it, yeah. And I mean, we're still a small state, but I do get to fly, and I just tell people it's like having a chauffeur, right? You just jump on the plane and you go, and you do your job, and you come home.
Well, we have tremendous respect for first responders and anyone that works with first responders just because we know the sacrifice that they make to keep all of us safe. And then you work with them to help them recover from the sacrifice they make. And so we want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I love
Yes.
the work that I get to do. It's a privilege to work with them, really.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, how did you first learn about the tappers?
You know, it came after I had attended training to get certified in EMDR.
Hmm.
And so I was just kind of looking to see, I had my first responders had a hard time a little bit with the eye movements. So I wanted to find other alternatives for the bilateral stimulation. And so that's when online, I think I came across Bi-Tapp and decided to use that as an alternative.
And I'm also a trauma therapist, and they're definitely use the tappers as part of reprocessing trauma. But have you used it in any other capacity outside of just the reprocessing with your clients?
Oh, for sure. And it kind of came around just kind of by an observation that it transitioned. So when I would first use it, of course, the idea was strictly with EMDR, right? When we're trying
Hmm.
to reprocess. But what I started to notice was that I could put these on an individual who would come in super dysregulated. And sometimes not even necessarily because we were talking about a painful memory, but they're coming in from a hard call or they've had a hard
Right.
shift or whatever it was. And I could put this on them, and you would literally watch them go from, kind of a 9 or 10 kind of
Right.
distress, and just little by little, they would be able to just kind of come down and be able to just have calm and peace again. And it was kind of fascinating to watch that happen. And so then I started using it sort of as that kind of tool. I think another thing that I started to notice was that a lot of people that when you would talk about certain traumatic things or even hard calls, like it, again, not necessarily in the reprocessing, but they couldn't articulate a lot.
Right.
He would kind of ask questions, and it was very brief. Not, and it wasn't that they were being difficult, right? It was just you
Hmm.
could tell they just had such a hard time finding the words. And yet we would put these tappers on, and sometimes I would just kind of I would let the tappers run on them and just keep asking them, different questions that we would normally do in regular talk therapy.
Right.
I would get so much more content that they could actually express and articulate what was happening for them, right? And that was, again, it was just, I kind of found that a little bit by accident. It was like nobody told me that that they could do that. But it was just realizing that and observing it that I thought, oh, there's something else that these things can do for my clients. And so that's how I kind of started using it even more and more as I go on.
And that's been my experience too, as well as a lot of other therapists. And so the research behind that just shows that the bilateral stimulation inhibits the amygdala. So as that calms down, then they actually get their memory recalls there and their verbal skills come back. And so you're seeing that in lifetime. And I'm just grateful that you've saw that and that you're sharing that because it's been a consistent finding among therapists that are working with all populations. And so that's a great thing to share. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, because we're all aware of the Maui fires that happened and just the devastation. And obviously, the first responders are there and doing all they can, and they're affected. Their families are affected, and then they're helping communities. And so, your work with them, I'm just curious, did you use the tappers at all in that capacity or anything you could talk about that way?
I do. So, generally, of course, especially like a lot of my response during the first weeks after the fire was in the field, right? So it's not like
Right.
you have a lot of regular therapy office resources with you. You're kind of on the fly, which is one thing that I love about the tappers is that I can pack them with me no matter where I'm going, right? And certainly during that time was no exception, is that if I find somebody that they just, they keep telling me I can't calm down, I'm having a really hard time sleeping, I'm
Yeah.
having, got to go back on shift and I can't just relax at all. It's a great resource and I used it that way to just say, look, throw these on. Let's let them run for, 15, 30 minutes, whatever it
Hmm.
is. And sure enough, like it can get them out of that dysregulation so effectively that it's like, okay, all right. And most of the time they're like, Doc, what is this? Because
Right.
they're so surprised at it works, right? And it's not anything that they have to focus on or that they have to try to control, which sometimes, first responders, they like their control, right?
Sure.
But with this, especially when they're in that trauma response after the fires, after any major critical incident, they are so anxious for relief,
Yeah.
right? And so to have a tool that you can just say, just wear this and let's touch base in a few minutes, right? And to watch them get back to that relief, that's priceless to me. And so I think, yeah, for sure, after the fires, I've used it that way with after many critical incidents. I do a lot of critical incident response,
Mm.
and it's a tool that I carry this with me. Even, obviously I fly a lot, but even when I'm going on a trip that's not work related, I'll carry them with me because I'm like, you find people with anxiety all over the place, right? And they
Right.
get dysregulated, and it's a great tool just to have in your back pocket.
Well, and I like to, I mean, because I know you as a psychologist and a therapist, you're teaching them different grounding techniques or coping skills, and they're great. But if they're too highly dysregulated, they can't remember them as well. But then if you give them the tappers and it brings it down to that more workable range, then they can use those other skills and tools that you've taught them.
Yes. And that's kind of, a nonprofit organization that I partnered with after the
Okay.
fires, where we were trying to get wellness technology
Yeah.
into first responders' hands, right? And that's the whole point of it, is that I could see what these tappers were doing for folks in my sessions or when
Mhm.
I'm on scene with them. But when I leave, then they had nothing again, right? And so the
Right.
idea of the goal with this grant was to get this into their hands. And especially after the fires, like you had, not only was the first responder struggling, right? And they were in ops mode for weeks after the fires, right? And anybody who's responded after major disasters, you understand what I'm talking about, right? So they're working, their spouse is so worried about them and
Sure.
anxious and afraid, and they haven't seen them, right? And so they don't even know how they're doing or what's going on, right? But then you have the kids as well, right? So this became like this family
Right.
stressor, which is not uncommon for first responders, right? The stuff comes home. So this tool, again, that's another way that we kind of remind them is like, you're not going to hurt anybody in your family, but we get that this is all, everybody feels this. So let's give a tool that not only you as a first responder can use, your spouse can use it, your kids can use it, it's
Right.
safe and it's effective. And that makes a difference, right? Because and I tell this to my guys all the time, is that when we are in fight or flight, one of the things that kind of gets disrupted is our ability to connect with people who are safe and good relationships,
Right.
right? And
Hmm.
so if we just stay in that, we build separation and there's already enough stress. Our families need to find a way to come together. And this tool, again, it becomes another avenue to help to heal that so that not only is the individual getting better, but the family collectively can reconnect and get through the hard time together through connection.
No, that's really beautiful. Can you think of any other examples you'd want to share of just people using the tappers, whether it's in your professional life or personal life? Is there just anything else you'd want to add that you haven't shared yet?
You know what? I'll pull in from my personal life.
Okay.
Um, I I love this tool.
Yeah.
Anytime I have somebody around me who is having a hard time, I'm like, I got something for you. Right. And so I've used this actually repeatedly with both of my parents.
Mm,
They've had different life stressors, different illnesses, and things that, it's hard to regulate yourself when you're in chronic stress state, just like
Yes.
everybody else. It's
Yes.
that human experience. And I think with my mom especially, she's the one that kind of comes to mind, that she loves them.
Mm,
She loves when I am home with her and I can say, okay, I can, and because I can feel it, right? Obviously, as a
yeah.
psychologist, I kind of read those things, but I'll be like, I think you should put them on. And she does, and sure enough, and
Just
it's
settles her
really
down.
yes. And to the point of there's a particular one that comes to mind that for her, she was just like, I don't even know that I would have gotten through it if it had not been for the tappers.
Mm.
And that was the truth of it. It was that intense of a situation. So yeah, I use them all the time. All my family, they know about the tappers.
Well, and I like what you said too, just like you can be there for first responders or, if someone doesn't work with first responders for clients or even our family members or loved ones, but we leave. And so what tool can they use on their own anytime they need it to help regulate? And that's one of the reasons Haley and I wanted to create the tappers is to give people that resource that no matter their age, they can just push a button and then just get a non-pharmaceutical
Yeah.
intervention and a something that they can count on every time. And that was really important to us. And it sounds like that's what's happening in your world too.
Oh, for sure. And I think within first responders, that's a kind of a baseline fear of being on medication
Yes,
because there tends to be like, well, what's going to happen with my job? If
right.
my man finds out, am I going to get desk duty or taken off the line, whatever it is? And I use that as a selling point. And even I think out here in Hawaii, we tend to, especially more like a little bit more of a naturopathic kind of way
Sure.
versus taking, just medication for everything. And so I use that as a selling point. And so a lot of my folks, they're like, yep, yep, I feel that, yep, that hypervigilance, that irritability, that I have a
Yes.
hard time sleeping. And so I say, fine, I'm going to give you something that it's not a pill. It's not going to change anything within chemistry in your physical body. Let's
Right.
try this tool. And it's been interesting, even as I recruit participants for the grant, I take the tools with me and I'm
Good.
like, let's try them. Just put them on. I'm not gonna explain anything to you. Just put them on and tell me what you notice,
What
right?
you notice.
And
Hmm.
they'll I love it because they wear them and then they're kind of looking at like, what is this thing? And they feel the difference.
They can
Right.
tell.
And that quick, I mean, you're talking 15 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
And some of these guys, especially a first responder, they wear them on duty, some of our guys, right? And so it's like you're already escalated because you're on duty and you're hopping here to
Yeah.
there and seeing who knows what. And to feel like, oh, I have a way to kind of feel a little bit more composed or together or grounded, that's comfort.
During that stressful situation.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love the tools. I love the fact that, and that I can tell them, just throw it in your pocket. But,
Hmm.
with our grant, they get the straps, the bracelets, and I said, you can wear them on your arms if you want, put them on your pocket, put them in your boots, whatever it is. As long as it's on the left side or the right side of your body,
Right.
go out and do your job. Right. And so that opens up a lot of, I think, access to support that. And this is what came to me after the fires is that it was like I had all these firefighters, all these police officers, that it was just like I as an individual, I can't get to everybody. And even if
Right.
with all the other clinicians that are available, it's a really hard
It's just the truth.
population, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like and it tore me up because I could see the hurt, I could see the suffering, and yet I knew there was a limitation that we're not going to get to all of them, and yet they're suffering, right? And that's where, again, the tappers came to mind. And I was trying to remember when I first reached out to you during the fires. I know I was still very much on ground, but I don't remember exactly when.
Well, just a time where you were completely overwhelmed and just
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
access resources, which makes total sense.
Yeah. But it was just that idea of, oh, if we could get these into their hands, it would be something,
Hmm.
right? And just to give people more options to say, I can get through this really hard time. I'm not losing my mind. I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to
Right.
get taken off the road, right? That's a security that I think they appreciate, is to say there's resources. And
Hmm.
it's not only talk therapy. I think some first responders, right, they get worried like, well, your only solution is that I come talk to you.
Right.
And yes, I would like that. But if I can also say, but there's things that we can do to support you and your
Hmm.
physical body as you're navigating this. I love that. I love having options. And I love this tool. Not even because this is me giving you a
Right.
testimonial, but I just
Right.
love it has helped my people.
Well, and like you also said, we're not trying to say this takes the place of anything. It's just adding to what you're already doing. And what I love is with first responders is they're in that heightened state, and then they drop down because they're so tired. And then that's why it's hard for them to connect with their family and
Yes.
loved ones. They don't mean to do it. It's just they're exhausted. And so to me, to be able to use these while they're on duty and then to help with recovery after, it just gets them back in that workable range where they can be,
Mhm.
who they want to be with their family too and their friends. And so that's another benefit is they can just use it whenever they need to. And I love that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the misconceptions about first responders is that
Mm,
I think people outside of the field can say, oh, well, they're just cold and hard. They don't even want to connect with other people or whatever, right? And that's not true. I
right.
think a lot of times there's I want to, I just don't know how to get back there,
I
right?
believe that.
Yeah. And I see it play out all the time. So it's like if I can help them find resources that build that way back to
Yeah.
connect, that's a win.
Well, I just want to thank you for your time and just tell you just again, just we honor the work you're doing and we'll support you however we can.
Thank you. I always appreciate the support that you and Haley have given since the fires.
Sure.
Again, I can't even remember the specific, but I know that I reached out to you and that you were very responsive and helpful. So I'm appreciative of you folks and for the resource that you're helping us get out to people who need it. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.